Black Lives Matter everywhere, and that leads to a fairly radical conclusion. Check this out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Welcome back to the third hour of our program. On the line with us is the activist, co-founder, Code Pink and Global Exchange, author of Kingdom of the Unjust, behind the U.S.-Saudi connection, Medea Benjamin. CodePink.org, globalexchange.org. You can tweet her at Medea Benjamin. Medea, welcome back to the program. I read this piece that you and Nicholas Davies wrote. I'm not sure where it was first published. I saw it on Mint Press News, saying, Black Lives Matter everywhere. It's time to defund the U.S. military. Talk with us for a moment about the intersection of racism, not just American racism, but a racism around the world, and militarism.
Yes, thanks so much for having me on, Tom. Great to be back on the show. If you look at the history of U.S. wars since the time of Vietnam till today, U.S. wars are against people of color. And so many people in the military get indoctrinated in racist ideas as part of getting people ready to go over and kill people they know nothing about and really have no beef with. And so when you see the U.S. killing people of color in places like Afghanistan or in Iraq, or you see U.S. weapons being used against people of color in Yemen or in Palestine, or let's take it to the economic warfare that's been going on in places like Venezuela or Iran, also non-white people. The U.S. is at war with people of color around the world, and that is reflected right here at home. So the piece that we wrote shows how the inequalities at home are reflected in the inequalities overseas, how the attacks are reflected overseas, and how this is part of a racist system that is not just domestic but is global, where the resources of the world are held in the hands of a very small white elite, and the U.S. police and military are guarding that.
So in the United States, arguably the first war by Europeans against people of color was European settlers against Native Americans, which produced the largest genocide in the history of the world. We had the War of 1848, where Americans, white European Americans, fought against, to take, parts of the American Southwest and California from Mexico. And Mexico, at that point, most of the people that they were fighting against in the lands that they were stealing were indigenous people, indigenous to Central and Central America, but indigenous Americans, arguably Native Americans, and I mean this has always been part of the DNA of this country. But at the same time that America was being colonized in the 1600s, white European colonization was stretching out across the world. I don't know the question to ask here, Medea. I know where I'm trying to get to, which is, how did this white supremacy come out of Europe and basically over a 400-year period conquer the world and keep the world largely suppressed based on race? And then, of course, you've got kind of subsets of that. I mean, Japan thought they were going to do this with China in the late 1930s, early 1940s. And, and they were openly portraying it as a racial war, although the Japanese were identifying themselves as racially different than the Chinese. I mean, I think you could argue that using race as a presupposition for war, or as a justification for war, is a very, very ancient thing. What do we do about this, I guess, is my question.
Well, I'm glad you brought it back to the founding of this country. And what do we do about it? I think we build movements. And the purpose of the piece we wrote is for people to be reflecting on the call for Black Lives Matter in this larger context, to say that what is happening at home is happening overseas, that instead of saying, oh, let's take the military off our street and put it back where it belongs, fighting people overseas, no, that's not what we want. We want to use this time to really say, why are we putting so much money into the military? Why are these weapons from the Pentagon ending up on our streets with the tanks and the grenades and the tear gas and the rubber bullets? And isn't it really part of a much larger movement we need that ends the militarization both at home and abroad? And I love the conversation that's happening around defund the police and getting people to really think about what that could look like. And I think that same conversation needs to happen about our military, not just how do we take the money and reinvest, but also could a non-militarized international force really look like that takes some of the conflicts that are raging and deals with them in a different kind of way, just like we're envisioning at home. And there are so many of these, well, not the UN peacekeeping forces, because they are mostly armed and have been very controversial. But there are NGOs that have been created that send people into conflict zones, non-armed, accompanying people whose lives are in danger, and doing amazing work that we could really put lots of money into, because now they're funded with very small, $10 million budgets, and see ways to deal with conflicts not in the militarized way we're doing it now.
Yeah, amen. I've been affiliated with those. I was associated with a group based out of Germany back in 1980, and I went into Uganda during the war with Idi Amin. In part for that
I didn't
reason.
know that, Tom. That's amazing.
Yeah. The UK, I think that you could say the UK, this enforcement of empire via race and caste was something that was really high on the UK's list starting in the 1500s as the United Kingdom was becoming a world force, as they eclipsed the Dutch trading companies. And after World War II, or actually after World War I, the empire of the United Kingdom, basically the UK just said, okay, that's it. We're not in the empire business anymore. And, let their colonies go, essentially, and stopped enforcing this world order. And, they've been part of the new American world order, as it were. But we have about a minute and a half left, Medea. Do you see a way that the United States could set aside our aspirations to empire, or our actual, our ownership of empire, the way that the United Kingdom did?
I think it's inevitable. Empires come and go, and we're seeing Trump accelerate things in really making the U.S. Not be seen as a leader in the global movement anymore. Today, just sanctioning the International Criminal Court. I was on a call yesterday with world leaders who are anti-U.S. leadership, and are trying to find ways to really get themselves off of the dollar, to build new alliances. They look to China more than they look to the United States for support. So the U.S. empire is on its way down. The question is when and how will it happen?
Well, and also, does it get replaced by a neo-fascist Chinese empire?
Right. Or does it get replaced by? Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say that could be as problematic. They're enforcing racism against the Uyghurs right now.
Yes, but when you look at their relationships with the rest of the world, there is a lot more sympathy to the support from the Chinese than the U.S. exploitation.